Welcome to Bubbly Project episode 2. As you know, it is the Men in the Music Industry episode. We'll get into it when as the episodes go. But I just wanted to say, as a personal anecdote, for me, music's always been a part of my life. I have been writing songs since I was like 12. I've been posting it on YouTube. I still sometimes do it. But it's not something that I've wanted to take entirely, and it's not something that I've done a lot of research for, which is kind of why I thought this topic would be pertinent. But yeah, I really hope you like it. I know that these people who I've interviewed are really smart about it, and they have a lot of important things to share. So, hope you guys like the show. Welcome to the Bubbly Project. And on today's Bubbly Project episode, as you can see from the title, we are going to be talking about men in the music industry, which is somewhat of an odd topic, which is why we picked it. Today, I have Sidharth Bendi and I have Krios with me, two musicians who identify as male. And they're going to be we're going to jump around with a few topics. We're going to get a little bit nitty gritty, and they're going to try and educate me and you guys as much as they can, and basically have a comfortable discussion. Okay.
Awesome.
So jumping right into it, let's do with a little bit of like an introduction for you guys. So you both are musicians, and I hope that this is what you guys plan to do for. I mean, because you both are still young, but this is what you plan to do for a long time going. So could you guys maybe just share like what your journey has been like with your music?
So, my journey with music began when I was in 7th grade, and I downloaded FL Studio, and then slowly, it was a very slow process until it actually started sounding something close to music. But that happened, and for me, my journey has been kind of on and off because I struggle with motivation, and plus when you don't really have a lot of people listening to your stuff, you kind of start questioning if you really want to make music, but then you have to find peace in making it for yourself. So that's what I'm practicing right now, to just enjoy the process and not care about who's listening or not.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Actually, it's really nice that you mentioned that in the beginning of this conversation, because that's such a huge part of being a musician of any kind, really. And I speak a lot about that, where a lot of artists in the early stages, especially being as young as we are, and in our generation, we don't have the kind of exposure in the beginning to motivate us and make it look like something's possible with what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's very demotivating, definitely. But again, that's the only thing that really helps us build strength towards what we're going to do. And if we get through that phase, it gets very easy after that to really, do anything. So yeah, anyway, so I want to introduce myself. That was the point. I'm Sidharth Bendi. I'm a singer songwriter. My music started uh, just around the same time, maybe 9th grade, when I picked up the guitar. I was heavily inspired by Ed Sheeran in the beginning of my musical exploration. And I started writing songs through that inspiration and took it forward and released my own stuff. Then met a lot of people, and it became this whole journey. And I also run an NGO called the Beautiful World Movement. And what we do is educate children in orphanages. And through that, I have a lot of inspiration to constantly push and say something that more people need to hear, because I see so much through my NGO that I feel like needs to be heard more. So so far it's been like that, but yeah, just all kinds of online. I mean, I feel like I've utilized all the millennial resources that we have available today. Like YouTube is my best teacher, and just meeting people and hanging out with them is the things that inspire me. So it's very abstract and very young, and that's what I kind of stand for.
So for you guys, other than demotivation, because that is common, is there any maybe like sort of unique struggle that you guys have faced?
So for me personally, I'll keep this one short. It's been misunderstanding. I feel like I am misunderstood a lot of times. Even now, it's not something that is stopped, but not in a bad way, not in a way that it's affecting everything, but in a way that my approach to things is different. Okay, because me being very young, and which is common to all of us in
Yeah.
this conversation, um, there are things that I approach with way more maturity sometimes, because I started extremely young. So I did my first paid gig when I was 17, and I played at bars and places where only adults were supposed to be in, since the age of 16 and 17. And that kind of has an effect on you, and you by the age of 20 you can expect somebody like that to have a perspective on things that young people haven't yet been exposed to. And
Obviously.
I kind of tend to impose that on people around me, sometimes even in a way that is my mistake. Like I want them to learn at the end of the day, but at the same time I impose it in a way that they don't like it. So there's a constant misunderstanding, even in terms of music and all that, which is also like, I'm saying this, but at the same time, it doesn't happen often at all. It happens maybe, if you count it, maybe a couple of times a month, where there's a situation that there's a difference in ideology between a 21-year-old and a 21-year-old, just thinking differently because of the way I do things. So
Yeah, and
as an
obviously because
artist,
you both have different like levels of experience and different backstories, so you want to.
yeah, yeah, and as an artist, the first and foremost thing that I mean, the unique thing that I would struggle, that I've ever struggled with, would be that where I just hope that people understood, and sort of had a more open mind towards the kind of things that 18-year-olds are now capable of doing, which 10 years ago they weren't capable of doing, because of YouTube, because of internet, because
Yeah.
of a lot of things, because of access to a lot of things, because of parents finally understanding a few things that they never used to before. There's a lot of changes happening, and some changes are happening quicker than other changes. So I just hope that there are more people that can collectively understand something and want something for a person, instead of always making it okay to say that the creative industry or the creative community is always going to be a minority. It shouldn't be, right? Because there are so many creative people. It's just that we're not putting a label onto it because it's misunderstood.
Yeah.
So that's something I deal with.
A struggle that, I mean, it's not a unique struggle, but something I deal with a lot, and it also ties in with demotivation, is never feeling satisfied of your own work. And I realized that most artists, and like I've heard some really well-known musicians say that they do not like the music they create, but they still do it. And if there's no internal validation, then it kind of gets exhausting. And especially if you're not big, if no one's listening to your stuff and you don't have any inner validation either, so you will just get exhausted.
Okay, well, on that note, something that's very common that we always talk about when it comes to, the media industry, especially the creative industry, is, mental health. But I would like to kind of, and how one should take care of them. And everyone kind of thinks that all artists are depressed, or all artists, in order to be good artists, have to, there's this one very good stand-up special on Netflix by Hannah Gatsby called Nanette. It's a very famous one. And she says, people think that all artists need to feel in order to push out great work. Um, Mental health wise, do you believe that what you do as like create music is a way for you to actually help out with any inner demons or any inner saboteurs that you guys have?
What I used to think initially was that I'm feeling something, I'm in a shithole, I'll make music, it's gonna be amazing. But what I'm realizing now, that instead of dealing through the stuff I'm going through, music actually helps me wrap it all up rather than, go through it. Because while you're going through it, your energies are already so low because all the emotional burden.
Yeah.
So you can't really create a lot. But when you've healed, that's when you make things. It's kind of what goes around with Van Gogh, even though he's an artist, a different kind of artist, but people say that he made great paintings because, he had all those mental issues. But it's a fact that's been floating around these days that it was during his therapy phase that he actually made those stuff. So for me, music has always been a way to wrap up whatever shit I've gone through.
Awesome. Um, I think it's similar for me also, um, but again, I'd like to treat it as a process, wherein it is a fact that mental health is not something that you deal with and it's over.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
something
yeah,
that is constant, like just like your physical health, your mental health is a constant line which goes up and down once in a while, just like your physical health goes up and down once in a while. I like to treat it as that. And music basically, or music or anything else that I do basically, is contributing to either bringing that up or a down in that line for me. Like if I make music, I might feel shitty or I might feel really good. Depends on the music I make, depends on how I'm feeling, that depends on what it is about that I'm feeling, depends on the time of the year, time of my
yeah,
life, all of that stuff. So I like to treat mental health in general as a process for an artist. I don't think it's different from a normal person. I'm it's stupid that I'm saying normal person, but any person
yeah,
feeling anything mentally, it's not different for an artist. An artist's mental health is not one up than a
yeah.
non-artist's mental health. Like a lot of conversations feel like they're making it sound like that, but it's not.
Hmm.
An artist's mental health is just more spoken about because their outlet is their art.
They're able to
It's
express.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's expressed, it's either visual or sonic, and you just see that more. But that doesn't mean that a non-artist is not feeling, in fact, worse than an artist is feeling. So it's a process, uh, which is definitely a part of an artist's life, but it's not as big as the art itself, because we are musicians first, or for me first, personally, I'm a songwriter first, I'm a singer first, and then comes everything else that I am capable of feeling and all
yeah,
of that stuff. So yeah, just a process and a constant up and down. I don't have anything that I'm saying, oh, this month is going to be terrible mentally, so this month I need to write at least 10 songs. It's not going to be like that.
yeah.
So yeah.
As men, people usually, they look down upon men who express their feelings and who care about their mental health. That's what, especially in a country like India, where people don't have the understanding of those things. But as artists, it's a completely different perspective. Like, when a guy sings a sad song, like for example Ed Sheeran or something like that, or Logic writing about suicide, and I, I don't remember the number, but in his song, or like Khalid and all those things, all those male artists, when they say it, it's more acceptable for those type of people to kind of express their emotions that way, rather than like a non-artist, any normal guy expressing his emotions. So why do you think that? Why do you think that's so?
Okay, cool. I'll um Unfortunately, it is true what you're saying. It is true that artists, when they say something, when they express something, is just given more value, especially when we're talking about artists like that, Logic or
Yeah, yeah,
Khalid. They're up there. They're representing a whole community of people dealing with mental health issues.
yes.
In some way, they even use it for good PR.
Hmm.
Not that it's a bad thing, but it is true. Everybody
Yeah,
knows that. Um, I'm not sure why it is like that. Um, but I also can't say that it's wrong, because at the end of the day, it's because of these people being noticed that everybody who fall under that category is in some capacity noticed, not as much as we want to,
Yeah.
but say, imagine if Logic didn't do that song, or imagine if Khalid didn't blow up,
Yeah.
or Ed Sheeran didn't blow up. We wouldn't have as many. We would have three less people to relate to, who feel the same
Yeah.
things, who are whose feelings are accepted.
Mhm.
So if it's just in the way we see it, definitely it's a way in the it's a way in the right direction. So I'd like to see it like that. But yes, I'm actually not sure why it's so different. Probably because, not I mean, at the end of the day, the population of the world is increasing so much rapidly every single day, and it is obviously difficult to cater to everybody's feelings and needs, and to be aware of. In fact, how many people do we know in our life? Like, I probably know a thousand. No, actually know 1,000 people. I've met 1,000 people, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But that when you blow it into proportions of 7.6 billion, you can't really, even though you want to, you can't really accept how much feeling and emotion exists in the world for
Yeah.
everybody. So it has to be grouped out into Khalid's fan base, and Logic's fan base, and Sidharth's fan base,
Yeah.
and Krios fan base. It, which is why we are doing this. Or else, why would we do this? It's not like nobody in the world is talking about this, but
Yeah.
there are people in our circle who need to know about this, who need to be reminded about this. So it's just that. I think that's why the difference exists, because it's such a vast world we live in, that possibilities are so huge that we just have to take it in very, very small groups.
Okay, I lost the connection for a while, so I don't know if you've already touched upon this, but something I feel is that it's more acceptable when musicians do it, is because usually if you're not an artist, it can be difficult to actually say what you want to say. And if it's in a song, you can just send that song to someone and be like, I relate to this, and the other person will know how you're feeling. So art is just a better form of expression. I don't know if it makes an artist's emotions more validated, because eventually it's for everyone to consume and everyone to share.
I mean, validated for himself, definitely, which is a good thing, because they are able to express.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing that there's a set of people who are called artists, who exist and who can express. There are a set of people who unfortunately can't, which who are able to maybe express because of these artists. So it's a step in the right
Yeah.
direction.
What are some, what could you say about like the expectations, and just actually no, just the expectations of how a male artist should be, especially, I know that we've come a long way, but people still have an idea of, when you say, a male musician is usually, no offense, I'm not really pointing out any offense, but it usually is a guy playing a guitar solo in front of like a large audience. That's kind of what people see. And how can we, how do artists, especially male artists, how do you not let that expectation affect your style?
um Accepting what you like doing. um I'm one of those guys
Yeah.
with the guitar on solo. You could say that it comes easier to me than maybe a guy who plays the grand piano and sings in French.
Yeah.
So definitely, I have the upper hand, you could say. But at the same time, good for him for finding out that he loves that and he does that. And yes, there's probably a huge set of people who are not able to tell that they probably want to play the piano and sing in French, but they are picking up the guitar and singing Ed Sheeran songs because it's more acceptable.
Yeah.
That is a relevant fact. But um, as artists, I think if somebody like, because I know I personally understand this, I could go and say to a guy who wants to play piano and sing French songs to not sing and be like me, and I could influence him to do that. And I feel like in this particular question, this situation that you've given me, I think it's more, um, the artist being there for the other artists, or the experienced artist being there for the younger artists and giving them the right direction and letting them know that it's okay to be unique. And things like creators exchange, for example, can be put into this situation where I am constantly trying to tell people that, hey, it's okay if you have only 30 views. I know it's not 3,000, but you've started somewhere and you've come a long way before you started something, so don't forget that journey. So it's okay to it. And I'll give you another example, and this is a universal example where we all know a musician that is underrated and deserves to be as
Yeah,
famous as, say,
yeah.
a Billie Eilish. We all know them, and and in a lot of cases, and I know some musicians personally who believe that they are better than Billie Eilish, but they just don't want to be Billie Eilish. You know,
No,
it's a,
I see what you mean.
it comes down to a lot of what the musician exactly wants to be. If he wants to stay, a lot of musicians exist that just want to they just want to stay true to the art and don't care about what comes with it. I'm sorry, the power went off. So they don't necessarily care for everything that comes with it. And if more of these musicians are guiding the young musicians to kind of be like them, then we'll have a lot more unique talents being pursued and not sticking to the stereotypes.
Because anyway, like even Billie Eilish was someone whose music was so different from everyone else's music. So even at a point, even she was. No, I'm saying that that's how the tables kind of turn. Even like for example, the example you gave for of a a Frenchman playing the piano. That's also something that earlier was the norm. That's what people would imagine as a male artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Joy?
Yeah, I don't really have anything close to the topic, but I want to say this, that we live in the time we're living in is actually good for indie artists, because it's now more accessible to just put your music out there than it has ever been. And as for the expectations part, if you're not doing music for money, if you're just doing it because you want to do it, it's actually good to not have expectations. And it's something I would advise people who are just starting out, is to just make everything you can make and you want to make. Because if you don't have a fan base, you don't have to please anyone, and you can just create things. You don't have to stick to a particular boundary. So that's kind of a little advice from my side.
Lighter question. What would you say your style is, and like what influenced it?
For me, all my music has been inspired by artists I listen to, and it's mostly just what I'm feeling. I don't really go after any style. I just
Uh-huh.
do whatever I can, even. Right.
It is constantly evolving, so there's no one particular thing that I can say about it. But you could say that it's a singer-songwriter act, but in a modern way. Usually, traditionally, a singer-songwriter would be using either piano or maybe a guitar and writing very personal songs. So
Yeah.
that's the sort of a stereotype of a songwriter. But over the past few years, the singer-songwriter genre has evolved so much. And usually, I feel like what's happening now, especially with me also, is that when I'm making something, if I don't know what to call it, it's being called singer-songwriter. So because of that happening over the past few years, so many electronic elements and so many even band elements come into the singer-songwriter genre, and that's where I fall in. So I have electronic elements coming in. There's music that is heavily produced, there's music that is just acoustic. So it's a constantly evolving thing, but my style remains very singer songwriter approach, where it's focusing on me, it's focusing on how I'm feeling about a certain thing or a certain person, and it is expressed in multiple different ways.
Also, when it comes to genres, I feel like they're not really good for an artist, because they tend to tie them down and A lot of artists
Yeah,
feel
that's
like,
a common
oh, I'm in
concept
this
these days.
genre, I should stick to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
It,
that's a
it's it
very,
it's more suitable for listeners because they get to find more songs that sound alike.
yeah,
But from an
that's a
artist
very,
point of
that's
view,
a
no.
very common conversation these days, because like if you see, Billie Eilish is called pop, you know,
Which is
and
totally, yeah, which is totally
yeah,
not
which
true.
is so new
People
because
start making up
it's
new
not
genres,
really-
like she's dark pop now.
exactly. But at the same time, every regular listener who's not artistically inclined would just call it pop. But at the same time, 10 years ago, Eminem was pop, you know, so we can't really
Well, pop
pinpoint
has never
what
been
exactly
a genre
genre.
that's
Exactly. So it's a constantly evolving thing. And say even something like metal has evolved into so many different subgenres now. Like there's this metal and that metal and this metal, and even hip hop, for example. There's lo-fi hip hop, there's dream hip hop, and there's atmospheric hip hop, and the alternative hip hop, and like there's so many subgenres of everything. So yeah, genre is has become a very abstract thing now. It's a very common conversation these days, where yes, artistically you don't want to stick to one thing, because the possibilities are so much right now, especially being young and being new to the thing. It's amazing to explore and see what all can be done within genres. So that's actually, I'm so glad you brought that up.